Nintendo of Europe has concluded their investigation of the disgraced Nintendo of Russia CEO, Yasha Hadaj. And I'm sure I'm butchering that name. I'm not Russian, so sorry. That being said, he has kept his job. This might not be surprising to those that were following the story, knowing how it might potentially be pretty difficult to remove him from his position in Russia, depending on how certain things might be working, in particular with the Russian government. But that being said, it's interesting what they had to say about their investigation of, well, the Russian president. Here is the statement released by Nintendo of Europe. Nintendo initiated a thorough investigation into each of the allegations made against the general manager of Nintendo Russia, Mr. Yasha Hadaj, in November. While the results of the investigation acknowledge that Mr. Hadaj's loss of temper on display in the video has at times also been observed in the office, none of the allegations of harassment brought forth in the wake of the video were substantiated by the investigation. Mr. Hadaj fully acknowledged that his conduct related to him losing his temper is a breach of our code of conduct and expresses his remorse to all those affected by it. He has received a formal warning and has issued an apology letter to all Russia employees. Our top priority is to ensure a safe and supportive working environment for all employees. It's because of these values that we committed to a full and thorough investigation into each of the allegations against Mr. Hadaj. Going forward, Nintendo of Europe will be providing more resources to Nintendo Russia to support their efforts to bring Nintendo products and experiences to Russian players. We want to ensure that the conduct of all of our employees is in line with Nintendo's company values, and we remain committed to upholding these standards in the future. So, for those who don't know, he was accused of many things. We all know probably at this point about the video, about how he was treating a bunch of contract employees through a live stream at a public event back in 2017. But there has been other allegations against him made since by former employees, both about outbursts he's had in the office, which Nintendo of Europe admits they were able to prove occurred, and then sexual harassment. That was another big thing looming over him, and how he treated female employees. Now, they were unable to apparently prove any of the accusations by former female employees, but they were able to prove the outburst. What I find interesting in all of this, however, is that the resolution, while not surprising, because I always thought it would be difficult to remove him depending on how the politics are working in that country, it's interesting that they openly admit that there are multiple occasions of him breaking the code of conduct, both in that public video and in the office workspace with the rest of these professionals that are also being paid by Nintendo, but that wasn't enough to actually fire him. Instead, they slapped him on the wrist and made him write an apology letter. That is not a good look for Nintendo of Europe. It's not a good look for Nintendo on the whole. I know this story is going to get washed under the bridge, and no one's really going to be talking about it here, in a month, in a week even. People aren't really going to care, and despite all the backlash that's going to be, brought out there by fans of Nintendo in Russia, and all the backlash that might be brought out, against people, well, not against people like me, but in the comments on videos and articles that cover this story, I honestly think it's going to get washed under, because this is it. We can't make Nintendo of Russia fire the president of the CEO, the general manager of Nintendo of Russia. We can't make them do it. And if they think this behavior, even forget the sexual harassment charges and all that stuff and whatever, because they couldn't find enough evidence to substantiate those reports. The fact that he has lost his temper in that video, in a public space on a live stream, the fact that he has also had times where he has lost his temper like that in the workplace. So not just there on that stream, but also in the office. How many times must someone break the code of conduct, which he says, which Nintendo of Europe openly admits, he broke the code of conduct, but he didn't just do it once. It wasn't like this was a one-off temper tantrum. This wasn't like Reggie came to work one day really frustrated and yelled at Bill Trinan. Like, This isn't a one-time thing. It's happened multiple times by Nintendo of Europe's own investigation, admitting as much, saying it's happened multiple times in the workplace, and it happened in that public display video. That's not enough to fire someone? It makes you question, obviously, a bit of Nintendo's morals, because if you have a code of conduct, but there's no punishment for repeatedly breaking that code of conduct except an apology letter, you think this is going to change anything? You think Yasha Hadaj is going to change his behavior just because they slapped him on the wrist and made him write a letter? Oh, they're sending more resources. What are those resources exactly? They're not going to tell us. And I'm sure the Nintendo of Russia fans probably won't see a lot of positivity changed by these extra resources. And by extra resources, do they just mean they're going to give that president more money? I mean, is that the resources they're talking about? Just giving him more money to use and abuse? Reality is, we don't know if anything's going to change in Nintendo of Russia, and I know it feels like I am being overly harsh on Nintendo of Europe's response, but that's because I don't know how you can keep someone who has broken Nintendo's code of conduct multiple times by your own investigation. How does he stay employed by you, especially in a position of authority? We're not talking about, a game tester coming to work and getting frustrated and yelling at people, okay? That would break the code of conduct too. We're talking about a person in a position of power that presides over, presumably, hundreds of employees. We're talking about that guy losing his temper. You cannot have that at the top of the food chain, but that's what it is in Nintendo of Russia. Now, again, it was always a long shot to get him fired. I always said he should be fired if any of these allegations were proven true. And forget the fact that they couldn't prove the sexual allegations. They proved the misuse of, the verbal abuse and the loss of temper. They proved that occurred. And it still wasn't enough. I question Nintendo's priorities when it comes to stuff like this, because this is a bad look for Nintendo of Europe. It's not just a bad look for Russia. Nintendo of Europe won't get rid of the guy, and they won't get rid of him for probably reasons that they'll never state publicly, reasons that we've kind of touched upon, reasons that assume that there's a connection between him and potentially Vladimir Putin's government, where they're allowed to operate in certain ways and have certain freedoms because of his connection, and because of that, Nintendo won't get rid of him. That is the presumed reason that despite numerous confirmed violations of the code of conduct as a manager of a bunch of people, he's been allowed to keep his job. People get fired for less all over Nintendo of Europe, all over Nintendo of America. I mean, Nintendo of America let someone go because they had extracurricular activities on the side that were unrelated to their work. If Yasha Hadaj had those, Nintendo probably wouldn't even consider it a violation of their code of conduct. Now, granted, I know different countries, Russia, America, different set of rules, different laws. I understand that. It's frustrating to me. I feel for the Russian Nintendo fans that really hoped that now that this had worldwide attention, something was going to change. And I'm sad to report to you, absolutely nothing has changed. And I'm sorry. I feel like we did the best we could as a YouTube channel. We did the best we could as a fan base. Ultimately, we can't force Nintendo of Europe to do anything. Nintendo of Europe has chosen to essentially not act on these allegations, to not act on the evidence they have proving that some of these allegations are true, to not act on the various accounts of breaking the code of conduct. And I'm sorry. I wish there was more we could do. Maybe someone can keep, maybe someone in the media can keep pressing Nintendo on this in Europe, Nintendo of Europe on this in interviews or something. Although if they do that, they'll probably lose the ability to interview. So it's not a good situation, and I'm sorry. That's really all I can say at this point is I'm really, really, really sorry that change is not coming for you fans in Russia that deserve better. Anyways, be sure to enter our Nintendo Switch Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Bundle giveaway through the Glean.io link down in the description. Man, what a crappy way to start our Tuesday here on the 15th of January. I'm sorry, guys. I tried.